I apologize for no journal reading this time. I just really needed to give you more context and a little bit more of the darker side of my childhood, because that would just continue to grow and grow, the dark side. My name is Andrea Belita. I grew up in a bunkhouse we made in Idaho. No electricity, no separated rooms, no privacy. We were preppers, hoarder style. An herbalist mother and a religiously extreme and dominating father. Abuse was prevalent. Songwriting and journaling are how I got through life. I bet you've been through some pretty gnarly stuff as well. Let's get reading. Hey, welcome back. I don't know if that's too cheery for like this episode, but I actually sometimes make part of the episodes at different times. So I'm just like, hey, hi, how are you? Glad you're here. I also was wondering, did I ever tell you what my middle name means? So my name is Andrea Belita, and my middle name, that's my middle name, Belita. And Belita is, I think I did mention it in this episode. I don't know. Anyway, you're going to hear it twice, I guess. So Belita means little beautiful. I just wanted to go with my middle name because Belita always had a significance since my relationship with my dad was so complex. I still always felt really loved, and my middle name is it is a beautiful part of me. So after doing last week's episode, I realized that I had shared a lot of really good memories with you when we lived in Twin Falls in that house on the highway. But I kind of forgot to share with you all the hard stuff, or at least some of the hard stuff. And I needed to give that context for you so that it doesn't just feel like everything was great there and then things shifted. So all of that stuff was ever present. And I know there's still stuff I'm missing, so I might even go back and add some in later, just in future episodes. This particular episode is really just giving background to the last one, and then I'm moving on to like when we lived with my grandma. You probably know by now that my songs are my therapy. So whenever I have a desire to play a song, I'm just going to do it on here. And I don't know if the beginning or the ending of the episode is the best, but I'm just playing around and experimenting. And if you have thoughts, I'm totally open to those. The next episode will be journal readings for sure. I wanted to play a song for you today that I wrote in 2023. Started writing it in August of 2022. It's called Metamorphic. And the reason why I wrote it was because I had just gone through a faith transition out of the faith that I was, and lost a baby and moved to another state and started trying to get used to being mother of three. And it was just a lot. And I was thinking about how I'm the exact same person that I used to be, but I'm growing and changing. Like I came from the same essence. And I was reading this book to my kids like every night because that's what they were requesting. And it's called The Hungry Little Caterpillar by Eric Carle. And it became my favorite book. And I would read it to them and I would just think about my life as, you know, an egg on a leaf and then turning into a caterpillar and what different perspective that becomes. And then changing, going into a cocoon, building myself a cocoon and coming out with big, beautiful wings. And it occurred to me that I am that butterfly and that I go through these different stages in life. So I wrote this song. And I'm not going to play the whole thing for you right now because it's super long. But I definitely, it's got like this whole bit that it's kind of like a talking, not really rap, but just like a talking part in the middle, but I'm going to skip that for now. Let me know if you want to hear that part at some point. Metamorphic, metamorphic, changing, but my essence is the same. Metamorphic, metamorphic, daisy from a seed, monarch gets its majestic wings. Every phase was meant to be.
its way out of its shell. The safe space it built around itself. The safe space it built around itself. Cocoon the room so cozy and warm. It's not easy when you know that there is more. You know that there is more. So you go. Beautiful wings, more colorful than you could ever have dreamed. Flying, seeing a whole new freedom, and it happened in your dark. Yeah, it happened in the dark. Don't be afraid of the dark, there's more. It's where you transform. It's where you transform. It's where you transform. Metamorphic, metamorphic, changing, but my essence is the same. Metamorphic, metamorphic, daisy from a seed. A monarch gets its majestic wings. Every phase was who it was meant to be, but it couldn't see. 'Cause where it got its wings, it's where I got my wings. And now I see me, the most beautiful thing.
All right, now that my heart is happy, I just wanted to move into the episode.
Good morning. It is so early right now. I woke up at 3:25 and couldn't go back to sleep. And that happens a couple times a week. And I know it's taking years off my life because it's been happening for like 5 years. But I guess I get a lot done. I mean, that's when I did most of the recording of a lot of my songs, my music production. It's when I did my podcast, when I first started it, like in 2019. I would just wake up early and couldn't sleep, so I'd work on it. So the morning hours are really nice, but I'm going to have to go to bed earlier if this is going to be my norm. Last night, I think I went to bed at 9:30. I realized that I really didn't give an accurate description of my childhood in my last one. So I did a lot of talking about the good memories of my childhood in our place in Twin Falls before we moved to my grandma's house. And before I talk about what it was like living with my grandma, I really want to talk about how hard it was, like the hard things from when I was a child. So when we lived in Twin Falls, I have a lot of good memories, and I actually want to tell you them while I'm thinking about them. I remember watching, my dad loved to dance. He liked to sing, and my mom, she liked dancing as well. She didn't quite have the same level of rhythm, but she liked it, and she was generally just a joyful person. If I brought something home from school, she was like, wow. And she was like, that's beautiful. And she always had praise. And my dad, he was also good at praising. And he'd, give you a wink and a smile. And they were both, by anybody who would meet them would just think they were the loveliest people. And they were, but the problem is that, my dad was angry about a lot of things, and I don't even know if he knew why. I don't know if he was like trying to work on it or not. I don't know. I think that he had an anger problem. And then, now that I'm thinking about it, oh gosh, there's this whole bit in his life that now I wonder if that's partly why he's angry. It was, it had to do with when he was like 19 years old. All right, I'm going on a tangent. All right, memories from Twin Falls. I will tell you this story about when he was in his early 20s, but I don't think that's going to come up quite yet. Because this story, that one about him going to a mental institution that I'm about to tell you, wasn't when he was 19, it was probably when he was like 22. And now that I think about it, I wonder if that's related to the anger. No, there's something underneath that. Yeah, because he was angry, and that's literally why he was recommended to go to that mental institution. So, all right, sidetrack. We will come back to that story later. What is going on? Twin Falls? Well, lots of joy, lots of happiness, and also lots of anger and sadness. So when I was a kid, my dad would dance, and he would dance around the living room, and I loved dancing too. So I was always dancing with him, and I don't remember anybody else dancing. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But he had a reel-to-reel, and he loved his music. He had a reel-to-reel. He had an 8-track. He had so many records, record player. And I loved it when he put on music. I loved it when he put on a record. I loved it when he put on a reel-to-reel and we'd listen to something. I loved it when he'd put on an 8-track. He loved music. He loved music. And that was the beginning of my love for music, is the joy that I felt in our house when we played music. Those really are my cherished memories. And some of my, favorite people that he put on was Neil Diamond. He put on, Grant, what's that Grant guy name? Dean Martin. I remember when he'd play like Convoy, that trucker song. I loved when we just on the music and we would dance and sing. And he also loved that Boy Named Sue by, my brain is just not working very well, but Johnny Cash, Boy Named Sue. Like, those are some favorites. And we just thought they were hilarious. And we had such a good time. And then as I got older, it was like the 60s that I really loved listening to. So like older as in like 8, 9, we'd sing. I remember we'd sit by we had a little boom box with a cassette player, and we would record what came on the radio. And I remember like, I'm so dizzy, my head is spinning, da 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 da, you're making me dizzy, dizzy. I don't anyway. And then another one that became my favorite was honey, da 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 da, oh sugar sugar, da 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 da, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you. Oh, poor little sugar, it's so good. Such a good song. That's literally one of my favorites of all time. And we would I remember we would just sit there and like record them on the cassette player. And I think we really did get our love of music from my dad. I'm sure my mom loved it too, but she just didn't have as outward of an expression. And now I think about it, since my mom passed, it's crazy. I didn't even really see this in her before, but I think she was more of an introvert. I mean, she was a friendly face. So it's just such a joy to anybody who met her. But I think she was more of an introvert. My dad was more of an extrovert, I think, but maybe both, because, they both just kind of, just wanted their own space out in their land. I think especially probably mostly my dad. I guess if I'm being really honest with myself, along with the beauty and the fun and the joy of my childhood memories, which I do have so many of those, there was just this angry side of my dad that I had a really hard time with. And I remember being little and, he was obsessed with weight. And he would have her weigh, and then if she wasn't what he wanted her to be, I remember him hitting her. I don't think it was every time, maybe it was. I don't remember. I just remember this visual of him hitting her on the back/shoulder, and that was really hard to watch. Because I loved my mom, and I remember I would do workout videos with my mom. She would have her rebounder, and I would do them with her, and that was such a good time. But I now, as I got older, I realized there was a lot of pressure for her to be thin from my dad, and she would later tell me all kinds of things of what he would do when she was pregnant. He'd make her run around the block, and he'd hit her as they were running. And now that I think about it, I'm like, was no one out? But no one was out, because, suburb America stays inside their house. And these weren't necessarily the suburbs, if you will, but people just don't go outside much. This is her being like 9 months pregnant, him having her run around the block to get exercise and telling her to go faster. And she said that one time she fell because he was pushing her so hard. But as a child, my greatest desire was for my parents to get along. I always felt like we had a pretty loving family, and kind of the visual I had of my family through all of my growing up years was we all loved each other, and there was like this circle of love, but it always broke when it got to my mom and dad. There was always this gap missing in the circle. It certainly wasn't for lack of effort on my mom's part, and it wasn't for lack of effort in what she wanted, There was ever a soul that tried their very best at literally everything. It was my mother. A good memory that I have was every single Saturday morning we would have bacon, eggs, sausage, pancakes, the whole bit, and occasionally waffles. And I loved waffles. Oh my gosh, they were so good. During the week, Monday through Friday, we would have, whole grain cereal like cream of wheat or 7-grain cereal with like raisins in it and honey. And then Sunday, we would have like mixed cereal. So not just Fruit Loops, but Fruit Loops mixed with Raisin Bran mixed with a few different cereals. And I think that was to try to make it a little bit more healthy. Ate well, and my parents were very conscious about what we ate. We always had whole grain bread. My mom would make that. And we always had made food. I mean, I was born in 1983. So it was not a huge revolution for boxed foods and stuff, but I know other people did it. We just didn't. And my dad had this recipe that he brought back from South America called jugo de plátano. And it's basically banana milk, where you put banana and sugar and vanilla in a blender with milk and you blend it up. And it was one of my absolute most favorite drinks, and I wanted it all the time. I was a little banana lover, and my dad would call me a monkey. I was born at home. My brother was born at home. And it's because my parents really didn't like hospitals, and they didn't like the medical industry because they had had an experience where one of my siblings had been nearly switched at birth, and they were like, this isn't our baby. The doctor was like, yes, it is. Anyway, they had this whole thing. And after that, they decided they wanted to have us at home. Plus, I don't know what kind of insurance my parents had, because I know at some point they just didn't have insurance. And it could have been all along, or it might have been later after I was born, but there were a lot of times when I wanted to do things like go skiing with the kids at school, but couldn't because we didn't have insurance. I'm the youngest of 7 kids. The oldest child is 14 years older than me. My dad had 2 from a previous marriage. My mom had 1 from a previous marriage. Then they got together and had 4. But I saw all of us siblings, even the half siblings, as like full. Like in my mind, they were my full siblings. And I really, really looked up to them. But I had a hard time because as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, I was 4 when my sister and brother both ran. Well, the narrative at my house was that they ran away from home. And my oldest brother ended up going on a mission and graduating high school and going on a mission. And then I don't know. I don't actually for sure know if my oldest brother or my second oldest brother or sister graduated high school, because I know they left our home and I'm not sure where they went from there. I mean, now that we're older, I'm sure I've asked them at some point, but I don't remember the details. All I know is that I was taught to pray for them all the time, to come back to the church, to basically have a change of heart. I have asked them why they left, and it was both because of abusive reasons. My oldest sister, she was like, when I was told to weigh and then I could fit both of my hands around my waist, she's like, I knew I had to leave. I couldn't do it anymore. And my second oldest brother left because of abuse. My dad treated him poorly, and that was not unusual. My dad treated everybody super poorly, but I think he got an extra amount of negativism because he was not my dad's real son, and that kind of bled into how he approached him. But to be honest, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I wonder if any of my siblings would be interested in coming on the podcast and sharing a little bit about some of these life experiences growing up. I don't know. It is a lot. Our whole family, I mean, eventually my dad went to prison. But there's just so much healing that my family has needed to go through over the years. So I don't know. Is that something you guys would want? Is that something I should ask them for? You have a link to your thoughts and feelings in the show notes. So if you do have any thoughts about that, it's always worth a shot. If that's something you guys are interested in, is bringing other siblings on to kind of hear their perspective on some things. If you're on Spotify, you can also make a comment in the comments section of the podcast episode. So I remember idolizing my oldest sister because she was such a good singer, had such a good voice, and she was so pretty. And I just thought she was the prettiest. I mean, I thought my mom was beautiful. And also I had a cousin, Shayla, who my oldest cousin had just married, and I thought she was so pretty. So those are some things. And then what else? I remember my mom would we called them suckers, but lollipops, would make lollipops with us at home with these molds that she had. And we would always, me and my brother would always, fight over who was going to lick the butter off the package when she was baking or making something. She would buy lard from the store and use that for her cooking. And we'd go to this place, I don't remember what it's called now, but get these huge blocks of cheese. And we lived near an IGA, so I remember I would get money. And this one particular time is if I ever got money, then I would go to the store and buy myself some candy. And in this particular time, I went and bought myself this whole bag of marshmallows. They were the colorful marshmallows. So I felt so lucky that I got this whole bag of colorful marshmallows to myself. But I just remember my dad, being angry a lot, and that he would yell at my mom, and that she just would just keep trying her best. And honestly, the church was kind of a reprieve for me because it's where my parents seemed to be happiest. So they would go to the temple and then they would come home and be happy. And looking back on it, I think my mom did enjoy time with my dad sometimes, but he was pretty incessant about her just not being good enough. And he would talk to her like she, like encouraging as if she was like his child to be corrected and guided along to become better. I kind of feel like, they would go to church or they would go to the temple and then they'd come back and they'd be so happy. But I think it's because he got a chance to really lecture her and try to do it from a place that was not mean. They never just like sat and had real conversation about anything that I can remember. It was always kind of, their marriage was very task oriented. They weren't ever just kind of chit-chatting about life or, enjoying a conversation together. I just don't ever remember that. That really just is exactly my memory throughout my entire life. I never saw them just sitting and enjoying a conversation together because he never saw her as his equal. He always saw her as someone to be reprimanded and corrected and that didn't have the same intellect or spiritual wisdom that he did. Another fun memory that I have growing up is that my siblings and I would wake up early on a Saturday morning and watch Saturday morning cartoons at like 6 a.m. Garfield and Captain Planet and so many of those good ones. One year for Christmas, we got, like somebody did Secret Santa for us. So we heard the doorbell ring, we went to the door, no one was there. And box on our doorstep, and basically for 12 days somebody gave us something or a box of things, and I remember getting this beautiful little doll and I was so excited about it, fabric doll, and then I got a curling iron, which I just was so thrilled about because we were using those pink roll-up curlers at nighttime. My mom would put those in our hair, and we would get, one particular time, a mini keyboard. I mean, looking back on it, I'm like, wow, people spent a reasonable amount of money on us. Or it's possible these things were secondhand and I didn't know it, but either way, I was thrilled because I had always wanted a little piano or a piano of some kind. So this tiny little keyboard was just perfect, and I played it all the time. It had all these little presets for sounds and beats and whatever, and it was just this like little battery operated one. I think that was the beginning of me playing music. Like, it was one thing to dance to music, and another thing to sing to music and put it on the radio or put it on the record player, but a totally different thing to like sit down and try to make music. I would go to church on Sundays, and I would come home and try to play the songs that we were learning at church, or I would try to play something that I heard on the radio.
Oh yeah, and we all got Spanish middle names because my dad served a mission in South America. So my middle name is Belita, which means little beautiful, or also Elizabeth. And I've asked so many people from Latin America if that's what actually means, and none of them say it is. So I don't know, but that was my dad's interpretation of it, and that's what he was trying to do, was a little beautiful. And I asked them how they chose my first name, and they just said, I don't know, we just opened up a baby book and saw the name Andrea and really liked it. I'm like, okay, well, that works.
I've had a couple of cousins tell me that when they were going to come to my house for a sleepover, they were actually scared of my dad, and they would want to come over, or they would come over to sleep over with my sister, who is not like 4 years older than me, and maybe even one's older than that with my oldest siblings, and that a couple of them were scared of my dad, and they were scared of sexual abuse. They never said that he did anything to them, but they just had this feeling around him when they were younger that they couldn't quite pinpoint. And I never had issues with that. Like, I remember being little and going into in the middle of the night, I would go into my parents' room and I would go walk over to my dad's side of the bed, and he would just get his big muscular arm and like kind of put it around me and then like pull me over into the middle between he and my mom. And I just remember feeling so secure and comforted in there. But I also remember getting so hot under the covers and then getting so cold outside of the covers, and he'd be like, "Are you in or out?" And I had to choose, and that was so hard. But no, I always had really beautiful experiences going to sleep in between my parents. I also wet the bed a lot when I was a child until I was like 6. I also sucked my fingers, my two middle fingers. And I outgrew that as well when I was about 6. I think I mentioned before that I was blind in my left eye. You know, what's interesting about that is that my dad would tell me this narrative that he prayed to have something wrong with me so that I wouldn't be as attractive to the men. And I'm like, this was the narrative I was literally told by him my whole life. And he'd be like, well, you know, I prayed while you were in your mom's stomach, or that when you were in your mom's, he didn't say stomach. I mean, it's kind of funny that maybe I said stomach. That's so crazy. Babies are not in people's stomachs. All right. So I don't remember the exact verbiage he used, but I know it wasn't stomach and I know it wasn't uterus. I know he said something along the lines of, while your mother was pregnant with you, I prayed to ask the Lord to have you not be as beautiful, or something like that. Like that there would be something wrong to make you humble so you wouldn't be as beautiful. That was because he would claim that my oldest sister would sneak out of the house and go be with boys. But she told me later that that was not happening. And so I think he just made up some stories in his head. And this is kind of what it was like living with my dad my whole life, is he would just make up these kind of strange stories about how strong he was or about how wronged he was. And women were usually the perpetrator for him, even though he had such a good relationship with his mother. And I can tell you why later on, why I think he had a thing against women. It was because of some childhood experiences, but that'll be later on. Basically, he didn't want me to turn out like my oldest sister, even though my oldest sister was literally in survival mode because she was dealing with a dad who was abusive and a mom and dad who had split. And then the mom remarried somebody abusive. And then she came to live with my dad for a little while as a late teenager, and then also found abuse once again. So there was no real reprieve for my oldest sister and my oldest brother, and both my oldest brothers, from kind of their life of abuse. Yeah. I think I was a highly sensitive child now that I think about it, like, because I think I'm also a highly sensitive person. I have a song about that called it Highly Sensitive. I really think I was and am, because I am very sensitive. I have been very sensitive in my life. Just to kind of end this episode, I think that, that pain and that desire for my family to just feel whole and loved, for my parents to just love each other, that was something that never went away. That was something that never went away until their divorce much later in life. I'll hit that story up at some point. But that's just a gap that I had to just get used to and live with, and I never got used to it. I just had to live with it, and it was this insecurity. I really think it created a lot of insecurity in me. And that was in part because I could just feel it so deeply. I could feel that gap so deeply, and I didn't have anything to replace it with because I didn't have any best friends. My parents were my best friends. I think in my mind, like, I loved my parents so much, and I just wanted to be with them. A ton with my two brothers who were next to me in age. So one brother was a year older than me and another brother was 3 years older than me. And we played all the time together. My brother, 3 years older than me, would play Barbies with me. And my next brother, who was a year older than me, would not play Barbies with me because that was girl stuff and he didn't do girl stuff. But yeah, it's just interesting. Remember, I had a friend named Tokta, and I really, really loved my friend Tokta. We were good friends. She was from Laos, and I remember being introduced to ramen noodle soup. Or no, I think we knew about ramen noodle soup, but her brother Noom would just eat it raw, and I'm like, wow, that looks so good, like those crunchy noodles. And they lived down the street, but they would always come play at our house. And then there was this other friend, Nicolina, who I would go to her house. I just wanted a best friend, and I just didn't have one when I was going to that school. But I would go to Nicolina's house, and she had literally everything. She had the entire upper level of the house to herself. It was this big kind of loft thing. I mean, the house, I think, looking back now, was probably a pretty small house. But the upstairs was nice, and she had Barbies galore. She had so many, her room was beautiful, and it was clean and tidy, and she had so much space. She was an only child, and I felt like she was always bragging. Looking back, I just had a warped view of what bragging is. I think it's okay for kids to tell about what they have and to be excited about it, but I think back then I looked at it as bragging. But she was this very, fun and vivacious person, but I just always felt like she thought she was like, she would just brag about her stuff all the time. And back then, maybe because I was jealous, I don't know, but I didn't like her very much. It's like I liked her, but I didn't, because I didn't feel connected. Maybe it was that I didn't feel a connection to her. Like my friend Tokta, she and I were good friends. I knew she liked me for me. And Nicolina, I guess maybe I just didn't know how to feel secure around her. I'm not sure. Maybe it was just so much about the things, and I was, who knows if it was me as a child just feeling like I was lacking. I don't know. A couple more thoughts. So the upstairs was my mom and dad's room, and then me and my sister's room, and then like a little cute kind of sunroom area that my parents always had covered up with curtains, so we never actually got to see through the windows. I look at it now, it was just covered in windows. And we just never got to see through them. And then the fridge was in the sunroom, and we had a little kitchen, and then we went, and then it would go downstairs. Oh, and a bathroom upstairs. We had it was one bathroom house. Downstairs was kind of creepy because we had the fruit room, is what we called it, or the cold room. We called it the cold room, where we'd keep our potatoes and our canned goods, and then my brother's room, where they would share a room on a bunk bed, and then my oldest brother's room, clear in the corner. Wow, so it was I'm actually looking back on this. And then we had a bed. At some point, my sister and I moved into that bed, and I don't know why. It was right outside of my oldest brother's room. And we shared a bed downstairs, and it was kind of creepy, I remember. I don't know why we moved rooms, now that I think about it. I don't know who moved into that room next to my parents. But, no idea. But that was the layout, and it was super creepy and kind of crowded downstairs. It had a lot of clutter. My dad built a potbelly stove out of whatever you build a potbelly stove out of for firewood, and that's what heated the house. And that's it. That's the main there was a lot of spiders downstairs. There were a lot of cockroaches in the house. Yeah, I really didn't like those things. But overall, looking back, I was pretty unaware of a lot of things, and the biggest gap was my parents' relationship. But overall, I really have tons of good memories from my childhood. So it's this weird dichotomy, and basically the dichotomy that includes my dad will be that way throughout my whole life until nearly the very end, and when things start to change a little bit. So I apologize for no journal reading this time. I just really needed to give you more context and a little bit more of the darker side of my childhood, because that would just continue to grow and grow. The dark side grows and grows over time. I mean, the thing is there's still so much backstory that you're going to hear about from my dad. But as a 5-year-old, from my 5 to 10-year-old perspective, up until when we moved into my grandma's house, crazy enough, just things grew and grew. Like the darkness grew and grew. To the demise of and the breaking of the family. So I will be back with journal entries about living with my grandma.
If you're taking this journey with me, then you're going to hear all of the journal entries from my growing up years, and you're going to see how quickly things start to devolve. So it went from my grandparents' house to living in a trailer to living in what we built, the bunkhouse, and they wouldn't stop for the next 30 years. If you'd like to share your questions or comments, please go down to the link in the show notes where you can ask me questions. You can tell me what you think of the episodes. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please write a review. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can actually just make comments underneath each episode. Share this podcast with anyone you think might be interested in listening to the story or could relate in some way. And I'll see you in the next one. All of the produced music on my episodes you can find anywhere you stream music under Andrea Belita.